Hey guys, it is me, Known Wells, Noni Pants McGee. I don't wear pants. What am I saying? I'm Noni Shorts. Pants are tyrannical leg prisons. That's a thing I like to say, because I don't like to wear pants. I like shorts. I'm not just wearing underwear while I record, I wear shorts. That's what not liking pants means. Anyhoozles, today's show, episode 16, is a Tony Time episode. Tony and I talk a bit about bipolar disorder. I also reveal some pretty strange and bizarre dreams that I've had in the past, and Tony makes fun of me. No, he doesn't really make fun of me. It's just silly and fun, but yeah, dreams are weird. And we also talk about the romanticization of the crazy artist. If you haven't listened to episode 15 with Sarah Jickling, go back and do that. That'll provide a bit more context for this episode. The disclaimer for the show is that the Yumi Empathy podcast is for informational and or entertainment purposes only and is not a substitute for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Oh, and the last thing is that if you're not following Yumi Empathy on Twitter and Instagram, please do that. I'm at Yumi Empathy. And if you want to chat or be on the show, I'm looking for new guests, actually. Just shoot me an email at yumiempathy, yumiempathy@gmail.com, or you can just, message me on Twitter or Instagram at yumiempathy. And check us out on Patreon, patreon.com/yumiempathy. Patreon's a place where you can support the show on an ongoing basis for as little as 25 cents per episode. And in return, you get some cool behind-the-scenes stuff, photos. There's some higher tiers where you can be a guest, all sorts of good stuff. Lovely stuff. Anyways, enjoy this episode, episode 16, a Tony Time episode on bipolar disorder and weird dreams and the romanticization, that's a hard word to say, of the crazy artist stereotype. Okay, enjoy. Bye.
La la la, you, me, empathy, yeah, la la la.
Welcome to Yumi Empathy, a podcast about exploring the struggles we face in our day-to-day lives as humans trying to get by on this wondrous and overwhelming pale blue dot. The intent of Yumi Empathy is to talk openly, without judgment, about our neuroses, our mental illnesses, our shared anxieties and worries, to create a dialogue that is vulnerable and deeply human and empathetic, and to share that dialogue with others to inspire emotional and cognitive collaboration and insight so we can, hand in hand, break down the stigma that make us feel shame and guilt for struggling, for feeling our feelings, for being human. Yumi Empathy is a safe place, a conversation between friends, a place to inspire the beauty in each of us. Today's episode, I'm here again with my friend Tony Romanticizing. Hello, Tony.
Hey, Known.
How are you?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well.
Good.
So we are exploring bipolar disorder today.
We are. We will attempt to, yes.
We will, yes. So if you haven't listened to the previous episode, my chat with Sarah, go do that now. Pause this. Go back and listen to my chat with Sarah Jickling on bipolar disorder. Sarah is just a delight and a really fascinating human and had a lot of wonderful things to say about bipolar disorder and the crazy artist stereotype and all these other interesting things. So go back, listen to that. But today we're talking about bipolar disorder. I'm going to ask Tony some questions about his experience with patients of his, But before we do that, as we always do, Tony is going to do his little spiel.
I got a spiel for everybody. So my name is Anthony Vermike, legally known by the Board of Behavioral Sciences here in the state of California. So I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, license number 47805. So again, I'm a licensed marriage family therapist here in the state of California. And I think that's everything I need to say. I think that's my disclosure, right?
Yeah.
California, Board of Behavioral Sciences.
Love it.
You've got my license number.
Yeah.
You know what I do. And I'm in private practice. So I'm a private practice clinician. And so my main job is seeing clients throughout the week.
Mm-hmm. So let's start with your experience as a therapist dealing with patients who have bipolar. What's your experience there?
Two thoughts came into my mind when you said that. And one is not a whole lot. I'm going to be completely open and honest with our listeners and you. And although certainly having some experience, what even kind of maybe prompted me saying that and thinking that is it's a really difficult diagnosis. It's a really actual difficult thing to discern. And I think it's a diagnosis a lot of times that comes from a historical perspective that really requires kind of a deep historical exploration, unless the symptoms are sometimes they're just very glaring. Sometimes in an interview or an assessment intake, you'll get a client who will share with you, the very clear identifying diagnostic criteria for a bipolar disorder, which may include, the manic phase, followed with, the very severe depression. And sometimes it's very clear. But I think, even in these cases, it's extremely important to have them, as we've talked before, evaluated by their medical physician to determine, just in case there isn't anything else happening from a physiological level. And then also what I always like to do in this case, or would like to do in this case, would be to send them for a psychiatric evaluation as well.
Okay.
Going to be really, 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 really important that they see their psychiatrist, get that evaluation done as well, because that's going to be a really important part of the assessment phase is, again, having them looked at and examined by their psychiatrist or a psychiatrist.
Okay. So, so you don't have many patients or haven't had many patients who've had this bipolar disorder. But let's just start maybe at the ground level. Yeah. What do you know about bipolar disorder? What's your understanding of it? And what are some of the maybe common treatments for it?
When you again just said that, what I thought about was not a client I've ever had. I'm actually reflecting back to a coworker that I had years and years and years ago before I ever entered into this field, and like one of my first jobs out of college. And what I remember, I was working with this particular coworker, and he went into this rapid like thought process. His speech was so fast and so forced and somewhat tangential. I literally, it was just so shocking because normally this particular person was very easygoing, was very kind of, slow in movement, slow in speech. And this was like a night and day difference. I mean, I literally thought I was sitting with another human being if I didn't recognize the person sitting right across from me. And I remember just being so taken off guard. I'd never seen anything like this in my life. And, some of the other people that we worked with were obviously noticing it as well. And he just rapidly said, I'd like to be able to go home early today. And he took off. And I think he took several days off after that, came back to work finally. And at that point explained what had happened was in the process of that day, he had switched into a manic phase and a manic episode. And for him, this is one of the ways in which, he displays his mania. And, and he just had grandiose thoughts and, rapid speech, high energy. And, it was like nothing I'd ever seen before. So once he came back and was able to describe to us that he had bipolar disorder and he was being treated for it. And he was actually, under a doctor's care. But there was something with medication. I can't remember exactly what it was, but this flared up and, we kind of all got to see it. And I remember that was, my first experience with a manic phase as it related to bipolar disorder. And it wouldn't be years later until I would see it clinically. But that was, the first taste of it that I ever had. It was fascinating. It was completely fascinating.
So correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Bipolar disorder used to be referred to as manic depression, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Exactly.
And that's, obviously describing two states of being, one
Yep.
the mania and one the low. So the highs and the lows.
The highs
right?
and the lows, right?
Yeah.
And I think we even hear people, in pop culture, use the word bipolar, right, when they describe somebody who's like two different people at different times.
Yeah.
I mean, you'll hear that just in conversation. You'll hear people say, obviously not using it from a clinical perspective, but like, oh my gosh, that person is so bipolar. One day they're this, the next day they're that. We hear that, quite a bit in conversation. And, bipolar disorder in its true clinical sense, looks, obviously we understand where people get that perspective because, you do have, like you said, these severe highs and these severe lows. But obviously it looks, very different in a clinical presentation than the way we kind of think about it, I think, from a pop, culture type of perspective and the way we talk about it. But yeah, traditionally we're talking about a disorder that has, as you mentioned, a very high and potentially very low lows. But, actually, as the two of you had discussed, and I believe she had said that she had more hypomaniac states.
Hypomania.
Yeah, so she had more of the
yeah.
hypo, which means, there's still that up, there's still that increase in mood but it's not quite as severe as a full-blown, manic episode, which can be extremely severe. In fact, the diagnostic criteria actually suggests that this person, it's the severity of it will probably lead to hospitalization. So they're,
Wow.
very, very high severity when it comes to somebody who has full-blown bipolar 1 disorder, we would call that, full-blown bipolar 1. And again, bipolar, 1 disorder is where the person who has had one of these manic episodes, they have it for a minimum of 7 days. And again, it's extremely severe. And so, which potentially could lead to hospitalization. You might even hear somebody talk about psychotic features as part of that experience. So in addition to just the potential agitation, racing thoughts, racing speech, and lack of sleep, or no sleep, grandiosity. You might actually even have psychotic features where the person may lose touch with reality, which is generally what puts them into the hospital setting is once they've lost touch with reality. But you could also have, very destructive behaviors as well. One of the things that can come with mania is an increase in risk-taking behaviors. And so, you obviously need containment around that potentially before the person could harm themselves with some of their risk-taking. So it's so you have that on the one side with bipolar, and then on the other side, you have the depressive features. And this is where, again, you would have on its own, basically a major depressive episode and severe depression that could last potentially, 2 weeks or longer. And again, very severe, criteria met for the more severe forms of depression. And, this is the kind of life that we're describing potentially for some people. And it's really horrible.
Well, in the way that Sarah was describing it is she was describing, and maybe this is out of the norm, but she had bipolar disorder diagnosed and anxiety disorders.
Yeah.
And is that common where you have like
It is.
someone who has bipolar has, sort of multiple things going on? Yeah.
Absolutely. One of the things that tends to be very comorbid with bipolar disorder are the anxiety-based disorders as well.
Okay.
So not uncommon at all. Comorbid also potentially have ADHD, ADD. There's comorbidity potentially with those as well. And it's not unexpected or surprising to have a comorbid alcohol or substance abuse dependency, which again, I think is maybe a person's attempt at trying to regulate the highs and the lows.
Right.
And, so that's, also something that you may tend to see comorbidly. So in the workshop actually that I was doing yesterday, and we were talking about sex addiction, and one of the things is we were talking about what potentially might be comorbid, but also what type of rule out disorders are you looking at?
Comorbid?
So comorbid is, what else might be there?
Okay.
So for instance, if somebody, maybe one of the classic kind of examples of comorbid is if we think of somebody who has maybe an alcohol or substance abuse disorder and they seek treatment, more often than not, you're going to find a comorbid or what we may call a pre-existing or a coexisting mental disorder or mental illness with that. So, for instance, the person might be medicating because they have anxiety, or they might be medicating because they have depression, or they could very well be medicating because they have bipolar. illness. They might be medicating, self-medicating ADHD, ADD. So in treatment, if particularly again looking at substance abuse or alcohol abuse or even sex addiction, once you get somebody sober, basically you've taken away that particular form of coping that they're using. One of the things that you're now going to look for is what might be comorbid. So what is it the person might have been using?
I don't know if you hear that, guys.
Should we explain that?
Scooby's sneezing like a maniac.
I have Scooby sitting next to me, and he had a little sneeze attack. Are you feeling better, Scoob? He looks like he's doing better. Yes. So he's looking at me with these sweet little eyes.
Scooby, you're comorbid.
You are just cool is what you
morbid.
are, actually. You're like our mascot.
Oh, Scoobs.
Scoobs is the best.
He is the best.
So once you get somebody sober and you get them stabilized, what you're now going to look for is what may have been underneath that behavior. What might be what we would say is comorbid. So what might be something else that they actually have as an underlying mental health illness.
So what I'm hearing you say is that bipolar disorder is a hard illness to diagnose.
It is.
Because it requires, you said, historical context?
Because, and it varies from person to person in terms of how often the person experiences these symptoms.
Okay.
So, for instance, I've done a clinical interview, an assessment with somebody, and it's presenting more, which is fairly common, is more often than not, if you see somebody clinically, they're probably going to present with a depression. It's very rare that you're going to have somebody who's going to present with mania because more often than not, the distress really comes in the depressed phase of the cycle. And
why is that?
Well, I think, from what I've heard from people before is that when they're in the mania, in a manic phase or experiencing mania, it can be somewhat enjoyable.
Yeah.
That experience.
They're getting stuff done.
They're getting stuff done. I mean, they're hyper productive. Yeah. They enjoy the feeling. Some people have described it as very euphoric, that there's just a very euphoric type of feeling that comes with it. They feel, this is the tortured artist stereotype that we were, that you two referenced. There is a burst of creativity. Mm-hmm. I've, heard people report high burst of creativity. This is, where maybe you've heard artists talk about how, prolific they are,
right.
in a manic phase. They can write tons of songs. They can write, tons of literature. They can, produce tons of, concepts and ideas for a screenplay. There's a lot of different ways, or a lot of different creative ways that somebody can, use, their mania, so to speak, as a creative outlet. And again, be highly prolific and very productive. So they're usually not coming in because of the distress of that, and they're usually going to come in because of the distress of the depression. Because again, the depression potentially being severe enough that it's creating, suicidal ideation. It's potentially creating, severe problems in functioning, occupational, personal functioning, and so forth. Just, depressed mood, right? Just very, very, very low affect. People would say, I'm just so down. I can't get out of this. I just want to stay in bed. I just want to sleep all the time. I'm not eating. I'm not sleeping well. I have suicidal ideation. And generally, that's when someone's going to seek treatment, is usually in those. And again, if they've had a manic phase where it was severe enough for hospitalization, they, at that point, like I said, that makes the diagnosis a little easier to make when you have somebody in a manic phase, or they can come in and report that they know they've been manic. But a lot of people, particularly if they've had hypomania, as Sarah was reporting, that's not as easy to identify. Or sometimes people just never thought of it as that. They just thought they went through a period of just great creativity. And I think Sarah had even said, oh, we're musicians. We're 19. We're all doing this. It's referenced in Arcade Fire's, one of their songs. Like, this is just a lifestyle.
Right.
So it's, people may not attribute it to the actual, or they're just not educated to understand what this actually is or what this potentially looks like. Especially again with hypomania, where it's not as severe. You're not having the severe features of a full blown manic episode.
Mm-hmm. How common are nightmares with people with bipolar?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I have absolutely
I was curious.
No idea.
Sarah had mentioned that she has had nightmares her entire life, still does.
Yeah.
like she said, every night. I was
Yeah.
sort of floored by.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine living like that.
No, I can't. I can't either. I can't. I mean, talk about disruptive and
Yeah.
I mean, and just, I know if I have one bad, dream in a week's time or whatever, I know it can stay with me, throughout the next day and
Right.
kind of really hit me emotionally. So but I've not heard of that personally. And so I unfortunately can't speak to it, nor have I read about that, in anything clinically referencing bipolar disorder, but that certainly wouldn't be surprising. I mean, just thinking about the brain and thinking about the misfiring and, and the things that may be happening that, that could certainly be a part of that process.
Do you talk, this may be a little bit of a tangent, but
Yeah.
do you talk to your patients about nightmares and dreams? And things?
Yeah. I really enjoy that, what's the word? Exploration of that for them. I very much love, exploring and talking about and processing somebody's dreams. For me, that gives so much interesting information about what they might be working through, in the night. And, I remember, as an undergrad in psychology and, reading about Freud and dream analysis and Jung's symbolism and everything, I always found that to be an extremely fascinating, kind of projective way of understanding what's happening in somebody. And as I've worked with, people clinically over all these years, and people have come in and reported, I think because they know you're a therapist, they feel like they have to tell you their dreams. Like, it's just almost kind of expected.
Yeah.
But usually it's fascinating, to sit with them and kind of explore the themes of either their nightmares or their dreams, and to even get some insight, I think, into what's happening for them relationally, intrapsychically, interpersonally, as they sit with you. And more often than not, again, there's a lot of good information. I feel like that, that they get a lot of insight that they get in terms of how they might be feeling about something that they maybe haven't been fully aware of, or something maybe they're repressing. And I'm not talking like memories or anything, but just maybe not in touch with, or the recognition that something may be a larger stressor than they've been aware of, and it's coming out in their sleep and it's coming out in their dreams. So I think our brain does quite a bit of work, in the night as we're processing that information. And I've also heard about some reconsolidation that's happening, in the brain when we sleep, and maybe that's part of that process, in the way in which the brain is storing memory. So, but it's very, I love it. It's very fascinating.
It is fascinating. I don't often remember my dreams, but when I do, they are memorable.
Do you tend to dream more abstract, or you?
I don't know. Last night, so this is a perfect example. Last night I had what I would call a nightmare.
Wow.
And I haven't really had one like that in a long time, but essentially it was a series of horror film settings, essentially, and I was...
Like from movies you've seen?
Maybe.
Okay.
I don't know. They weren't that recognizable, but they were, in my mind, sort of trope scenes from a lot of different horror movies I've seen, probably.
Like, was Jason chasing you?
No, I don't remember any specific characters.
No.
I don't
Jigsaw
remember
was telling you to go through this special
I don't remember
room?
any characters, really.
Okay.
It was just I was in it, and I felt like a victim.
Okay.
And then I woke up and couldn't fall back asleep for like an hour because I was sort of distraught. Yeah.
Wow.
I know.
That sounds really intense.
It was intense.
How did you wake up feeling?
I felt uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And I felt, I felt a little bit betrayed, because I watched these types of movies and I love them. And,
right.
So in that way, I felt a little bit betrayed. But yeah, it was just uncomfortable. It felt weird.
Right.
Yeah, it felt
like
weird.
betrayed by a genre that you love?
Yeah,
yes?
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, like that. So yeah, it was weird. But but it's rare that I do remember my dreams. Yeah.
Do you ever have just that straightforward dream where you're like, oh my goodness, that just was as plain as day?
Yeah, there are dreams I still remember to this day that one of them I had woken up crying. I was this may make sense to you because you're getting to know me, Tony, but I was driving with my mom and for some reason we were in a semi-truck.
Okay.
She was driving, I was sitting shotgun, and we were fighting, like verbally fighting.
Right.
And
How old were you in the dream? Like, how old do you remember?
I was, I think I was a teenager.
Okay.
I think I was a teenager. And I said, stop, stop the truck. And she stopped, and I got out and just like started walking alongside the road.
Right.
And she kept going. And then she had stopped and then came back, and then we like hugged.
Wow. Okay.
And I woke up crying.
Wow.
I know.
Do you remember what the tears were about for you? I mean, was that the fact that you guys reconciled, or do you remember?
Don't,
or just
probably, maybe. I just remember being like crying as I was walking down the side of the highway.
yeah.
And being upset by the conversation that we had,
Sure.
and wanting to express to her that I was upset about the conversation,
Wow.
but obviously wanting to connect with her again as well.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know? So
right.
there was all
Yeah, it's
sorts
got
of
those
different
themes, right.
emotions. Yeah. And that makes sense.
Yeah, we don't have to look real
That makes
deep.
sense.
Yeah,
I mean, for my life. So
right.
and then there was this other dream. We're totally tangential on this point, but that's okay.
Right.
I woke up laughing.
Yeah. Okay.
I woke up I was laughing in the dream, and I woke myself up because I was laughing so hard.
Right.
It was just this one image where I was myself in my dream, and I
Okay.
looked down, and I felt some sort of weird presence
Right.
in my thigh area.
Okay.
I looked down, pulled down my pants, and there is Actually, I'm confusing two dreams. This is one dream where I just woke up very disturbed.
Gotcha.
There was another dream where I was laughing. I'll tell you about it in a sec. I woke up, and there was like this brain, sort of amorphous brain, sort of maggot, like sucking my inner thigh.
Holy smokes. Whoa.
And yeah.
Wow.
And then the one that I woke up laughing was I basically was a character, and I had, perfectly square testicles. I woke up laughing.
Oh, gosh. That is awesome. That is awesome.
One more thing. Oh yeah, one more thing.
You can just keep going.
So when I was a kid, I would pretty much every night or every other night, I would have dreams that were pretty, like I would forget pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But there was always this character in them, and it was like this little devil character.
Wow.
And it was almost like, it seemed to be like a foot and a half tall devil character that just sort of hovered in my general area.
Whoa.
Isn't that weird?
Yes. And
I
like
know.
the kind of little devils we think of, pitchfork, little red suit.
Yeah,
tail,
exactly.
horns.
Exactly. Isn't that
Wow.
strange?
Was he telling you to do things? Like devil on my shoulder, angel on my shoulder?
No, he was just kind of sitting there watching me. Yeah.
Wow. And you've had that dream repeatedly.
Yeah, I haven't in ages,
Right.
not since I was probably a teenager. But,
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
But for countless times. Yeah.
So, I mean, in your dream, whatever it is you're doing, going about doing, he's just somehow in
Just
the background.
Staying there. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, my guess is, retrospectively,
Right.
retrospectively, looking back on it, I'm thinking, okay, well, I had a pretty sort of harsh reality when it came to religion, in terms of like how my father sort of positioned it to
Right.
us, and I grew up in a Christian household, and that was what was expected of us, and so there maybe I was expressing some sort of anxiety about that.
Yeah,
and,
right.
Who knows?
Sure.
Who knows?
I don't know, did you have kind of a fire and brimstone teaching? I mean, was that
Well, I mean, my dad used to yell, "What would Jesus do?" at us.
okay?
Yell.
Okay.
Like he would and I was always like, well, not.
That
not
sounds like kind of
yell."
like an oxymoron.
I know, right? I know. It always was, but yeah, it wasn't fire and brimstone because we went to. But the way that my father, because I think he was dealing with just a ton of guilt all the time.
Yeah.
For all his infidelity and stuff.
Sure.
He took it super seriously, and then required us to wear nice clothes to church, and was
Yeah.
always worried about how we appeared, presentation,
Yeah,
all that
right.
stuff. So
Yeah.
I think I got that anxiety from him, and I'd felt, a little fire and brimstone-y from him.
Right.
Not from my mom.
Sure.
But, yeah. So,
Yeah. That is fascinating.
anyways, that was a
Wow.
dream tangent
Wow.
of square testicles and devils.
Yeah. Hey, yeah. I got all kinds of visual things going here.
You see why I started this show?
Yeah, I know. Well, hey.
I want to talk about the crazy artist stereotype.
Yes.
And that one of the things, like, Sarah's an amazing musician.
Yeah.
If you guys haven't listened to her stuff, go out and do it. Sarah's Good Bad Luck is her band, and she's really talented.
Yeah, you and Jess played her for me. I was so impressed.
Yeah. And she was talking about how, like, her behavior in her mania and her, as she was experienced before she was diagnosed, was confirmed.
Yeah,
right? Like,
right.
that behavior was, like, to her peers, in some respects, like within the industry, like in the music artist sphere, was applauded.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Is that something you've experienced?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Not necessarily, again, directly, clinically in a lot of settings, but more so, maybe more just kind of abstractly with regards to, exploring on my own this particular disorder. And, us being in Orange County, kind of near LA, obviously a creative capital, one of the creative capitals, and, Hollywood and all the music that is generated out of here. I've just heard artists talk about that, basically the whole concept of living without your feet touching the ground is what life is about for an artist. It's not about being grounded in reality, right? It's a life with, again, your kind of head in the clouds and your feet not on the ground. And whether that's because of alcohol and substance use and abuse, or whether that's other things, or whether it's, a manic type of experience. But yeah, I think there's a lot of, encouragement that comes with being, hyper creative, right? And again, hyper prolific. One of my favorite documentaries on this particular topic and subject is one that was actually done on the musical artist Adam Ant. Remember Adam Ant? Adam and the Ants?
I do remember.
So this is an 80s reference, but Adam is still touring, and I think has through the 90s and 2000s and onwards. And he's had a very public...
What was the doc called?
So the document is actually called, I believe it's The Madness of Adam Ant. Let's see. I'm trying to remember. I think I wrote it down. The Madness of Adam Ant.
Okay, great.
Is the documentary. And phenomenal documentary on this. And again, this exact topic. And from what I kind of recall from watching this, when he talks about, his early years, because the diagnosis itself, you usually start to see the symptomology in, late teens and early adult is kind of when you tend to see the onset of this particular illness. So not uncommon to go through a manic phase at that age. And you may honestly go years before you ever have another one. You may have some people, again, who have large breaks between ever having another manic episode. Or you may have somebody who cycles very quickly and maybe have several within a year. But what I recall from Adam talking about, his experience was, he grew up, he was an art student. And he obviously fell into the late 70s, music world in England, which was really just kind of on fire at that point. You had the punk, kind of genre that was really gaining a lot of movement. You had new wave and kind of those different types of musical genres. But yeah, the Sex Pistols, you had, Adam and the Ants, you had The Clash, Bow Wow Wow, all these bands that were coming into favor. You had Malcolm McLaren, who was a big part of that world and creating all these, just amazing musical artists. And so he talks about, that time in life and that time in history in which his mania fit so well of that period of time because it was a crazy time of dress. I mean, you could be flamboyant and just crazy in your dress in terms of that creative form of expression. The more prolific you were in your music writings, that helps the record labels, right? Because
the more validation,
more validation, the more praise,
more money.
The fact that he could be a workaholic, essentially, the fact that he could go weeks without sleep and be so productive during that period in his life was also just, creating this momentum in his art, right? And creating this momentum in his visibility as an artist. And, so he could tour, he could create, he could be, recreate himself, in terms of an artist, many times over. And, I think, and he even talks about his kind of sexual history in this as well as being, very, I don't know what the word would be, prolific as well. And again, we all now know that these are the features of bipolar disorder, and specifically a manic episode. But later, he really experienced the downside of this. And, again, the documentary talks about the periods in his life in which the depression has been so severe that, he has, I think he's been institutionalized probably at minimum a couple times. I think he reported for fairly extended, periods of time, because the depression was just so severe, where it's so overwhelming. You just don't want to live anymore. You just can't live with the pain. So it's a fascinating documentary, and again, specifically, I think from an artist's perspective on what it's like to have this particular disorder.
What are the, so obviously it's so challenging because, putting myself in the shoes of an artist, I'm creating, I'm getting all this validation, I'm sick.
Right.
I have the disorder, but I'm also creating, I'm getting all this validation. What are or maybe I'm answering my own question, the things that get them to go seek therapy or go seek psychiatry or go get medicated,
Yeah.
Are those the depressive episodes?
Yeah.
Yeah, you already mentioned that.
Yeah, no, but I mean, it's great to reiterate
Yeah.
it. It's exactly. I mean, it's the depressive side. It's the downside, if you will, that will get somebody to be able to say, yeah, I can't do this. This can't go on. Because again, the depression is just so impairing. And just so psychologically and emotionally distressing. And so impairing that, I think that speaks to actually how horrible that experience must be. That, to your point, yeah, I'm willing to give up this manic phase, hypomanic, manic, phase in which, yeah, maybe I feel euphoric, maybe I feel creative and productive, but I can't live with this side. I mean, there's absolutely no way. I mean, it's
really
it's killing
only the other side, the depression side, that is. Because I'm ignorant of bipolar disorder, really, and the way you're describing the manic side, it sounds intense, but it also sounds amazing. So, it makes sense that the other side of the coin, the depression side, would be the thing that would inspire people to get help.
Yeah, and again, we can't speak for everybody.
Right.
I think everybody has probably such a somewhat unique experience with this, this particular disorder. I mean, there very well could be people out there who can't stand their mania or their manic phases because of maybe how severe it gets, maybe because of the psychotic features that can actually come with severe mania, the hospitalizations. So, we certainly have. It's not all awesome and wonderful,
right?
And, and a lot of people end up creating very horrible financial problems, as a result of just high risk intensity related to spending. I've heard about people maxing out a credit card, on one of these week-long, manic phases, so all of a sudden you can put yourself in tremendous debt. You can act out sexually, and you can go through a period of time where you're acting out sexually with many partners, and you could potentially put yourself in a horrible position there of, let's say at minimum, a sexually transmitted disease.
Right.
So there, or, even risk of, being, who knows what, someone could do to take advantage of somebody in that position. So, there are really some very, very potentially negative consequences for somebody, being in a manic phase as well. But again, more often than not, it's that other side of the coin, though, that you talked about, just the heavy depression, the, suicidal ideation, the despair, the hopelessness, and the impairment in functioning ultimately, just the impairment in being able to function, not wanting to get out of your bed, not eating, still not able to sleep well. And, and again, these are the generally what we'll see someone present with if they're just on that side. And again, like I said, some people, if there's been years in between a manic phase and their depressive experiences, they may not even necessarily recall that that's what they had.
Mm-hmm.
So they may not even tell you about it, even through a fairly thorough intake or assessment. It may come out later at some point. So.
So you had mentioned that you haven't had any patients with bipolar disorder?
No, I'm sure I have had over the years, but for me personally, it's been very rare.
Yeah.
It's been a fairly rare thing.
But
it's not fairly rare in the population necessarily.
Okay.
I can't remember the statistic. I think it was 2.6%, if I remember, from the National Institute of Mental Health.
Okay.
Please, don't quote me on that. But if my memory serves, I think it might be somewhere around like 2.6%. I think of the population might potentially have bipolar disorder. How many seek treatment? I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not exactly sure on what the statistics are in terms of people who will actually seek treatment for, or again, if it's not initially diagnosed or identified. So it may, again, if you maybe potentially are working with somebody and historically, again, they're just not familiar or remember that they've had a manic episode. So there's a couple clients who are coming to mind that I remember that in their presentation, in their assessments and intakes, could recall a period, as we talked about it, where they would have a period of potentially hypomania, again, less than 7 days, or a true manic episode that lasted longer than 7 days. That's part of the criteria where, we were able to connect those dots and be able to say like, yeah, that would certainly fit within a hypomanic or full-blown manic type of phase. And so it happens. But I think it might somewhat be underreported if it's been years since people or were even aware that they ever had it, is really what I mean. So, yeah.
So what are some other things about bipolar disorder that maybe the listeners should be aware of, or symptoms?
Yeah, well, I think, in terms of symptoms, maybe we've covered most of them as it kind of relates to a manic phase. And, and again, what you'd be looking for are, sleep problems, risky behaviors. I've talked about, just risky spending, overspending, very impulsive spending, impulsive sexual experiences, and again, things that would be out of character for somebody, right?
Right.
Somebody that this would be, very uncharacteristic thing. I think Sarah was talking about that it was her friends that were kind of pointing out like, you got to get some help. Like we're not...
Right.
So a lot of times, it's the people around you who are identifying and seeing the differences. You may not be seeing them. Grandiosity, just a flood of brilliant ideas, and multiple ideas maybe at the same time. So rapid thoughts, as I mentioned, rapid speech, irritability, high activity, again, just being super productive like we've talked about, feeling up, just feeling that high energy, feeling very up. But again, lack of sleep, high productivity, racing thoughts, racing speech, impulsive spending or risky spending. These are kind of the cornerstone symptoms of when we think of mania. And again, some of these may be hypomanic, meaning they're not as severe. They last fewer days, and they may not have the psychotic features. But at its worst, mania will have psychotic features. You will actually have a detachment from reality. Now, sometimes in diagnosing, that can be tricky in clinical settings, trying to determine and separate out between what might be schizophrenia, which the cornerstone to that is psychosis, versus somebody who might be manic depressant or bipolar. And again, that's why a psychiatrist has to be involved in that process for assessment and intake. So also for the fact that, these are disorders that are going to require, more than likely are absolutely going to require some kind of, psychopharmacological intervention, and probably, a lifetime management, potentially of medication for these types of mental illness, these particular mental health disorders. And so, you're probably looking at mood stabilizers, you're probably looking at antidepressants, and, is kind of the cornerstone, psychopharmacological interventions. I'm trying to think if there's atypical antipsychotics, maybe. But again, you're really going to need a psychiatrist, to work with if you're, treating somebody with these types of disorders. And more than likely, they're probably also seeing a psychologist who's also trained in working with these people. So but generally, it's a combination of medications and psychotherapy, in terms of what the treatment options are. Most of the treatment options as far as psychotherapy, it's still very much cognitive behavioral therapy that therapists will tend to use with this particular population. Family focused therapy, interpersonal therapy, a lot of psychoeducation, and maybe coaching, health coaching for people as well, to just kind of help them navigate this process, because again, these tend to be lifelong disorders.
Right.
So, kind of learning management skills, and how best to live with this particular disorder. So a lot of psychoeducation, I think, is, super, super important. And I think, I think those are, kind of really the big,
Okay.
Treatment type of based issues for this, this specific disorder. So I, thinking about that, I mean, again, like we always do is, if any of this sounds familiar, or, you have somebody in your family, I mean, obviously we're always encouraging people to go seek treatment and get help and, get assessed, because, this is a very, very severe disorder with potentially very negative consequences. And I don't know exactly what the rates are, but I know I have heard before that, the suicide rates for this particular disorder in itself tend to be very high, because of the severity of this. So again, if based around this issue or any issue, if there's any form of suicidal ideation that's occurring for you or anybody we certainly, would like you to reach out and get help. We have the National Suicide Hotline, which is an 800 number, 1-800-273-8255. Once again, 1-800-273-8255. So that's always hopefully important.
Great.
So, yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, so.
Well, thanks for sharing.
Oh, yeah, hey.
I learned a little bit more.
Well, I learned a little bit more too.
You learned more. The thigh brains,
monster, square testicles, and a 1-foot devil.
Oh goodness!
I may not sleep tonight.
Well, thanks again for being here, Tony.
Yeah, no, always my pleasure.
And
are we still stuck on Tony time? Did anybody ever come up with anything different?
No, I mean we had the Known and Tone show.
Yeah, we had the Known and Tone show.
Yeah, I mean I'm fine with Tony time.
All right.
So, listeners, thanks for listening. Thanks for being here. Definitely follow us on Twitter and Instagram at YouMeEmpathy. We also have a Facebook community where you can go and just chat and share your story if you want to. That's at facebook.com/groups/YouMeEmpathy. All these links will be in the show notes as well. And we have a Patreon, patreon.com/YouMeEmpathy. That's a way you can support the show on an ongoing basis, and you get some behind-the-scenes photos and bonus content and some other goodies. So check that out, patreon.com/YouMeEmpathy. And I will say thank you again to Tony for being here.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Thank you.
And to you listeners, I'm here, you're here. We're here together on this wayward, overwhelming, awe-inspiring pale blue dot. We have each other. It's you, me, empathy.
La la